Last Sunday, the 30th of June, I reached an important milestone in the refurbishment of this BMW E91 Touring, in that I was able to turn the engine on and not be met with any warning lights. Brand new discs displaying there on the front of the car. Just fitted 2 new front discs, and I'm now going to reset the warning on the car. There, you will need to wait until this warning disappears before you can reset it. There's a little twister on the left hand side of the dashboard. On the bottom, if you pay special attention where my finger will press the little twister, that will allow you to reset the service schedule on this BMW E91 Touring. The brake pads that have just been fitted there, and now when I turn the car on again, for the first time in about 6 months since I purchased the car, I won't see a warning light when I start the car. Unfortunately for me, this blissful development lasted a brief 2 days, where I found that the car started running poorly and I had a check engine light. Luckily for me, I still have this fantastic C-Reader OBD2 scanner 529 by launch that has helped me diagnose and detect that check engine light. It was BMW Doctor, also known as Dean, who has a YouTube channel, that turned me on to this fantastic tool. I paid 49 quid off eBay. I'm pretty certain you'll be able to source one off eBay if you're looking for something similar. It's really proved to be such a lifesaver in just helping pinpoint exactly what's going wrong with my BMW. So many thanks to Dean, BMW Doctor, for turning me on to this fantastic OBD2 scanner by launch. I'll show you this C-Reader diagnosing my BMW now. So the launch C-Reader OBD2 scanner has detected a misfire on the first cylinder. What I'll need to do is to gain access to the engine and to swap out the ignition coils to see if the error follows the swap, and if it does, then I'll have to replace that ignition coil. Now, I've already ordered an ignition coil. This arrived in the post this morning, so I'll be heading outside shortly to fit this ignition coil. If you're looking to replace an ignition coil on your BMW, I would highly recommend that you watch a video by Vehicular DIY that has an excellent breakdown into the history of these ignition coils. This particular ignition coil that I'm going to fit onto my BMW E91 Touring was available in around 2006. Subsequent to this ignition coil, there have been an additional 2 iterations. So BMW no longer use this ignition coil by Bosch. They use an ignition coil by a company called Aldor. In fact, that ignition coil is used on the entire range, including even the Rolls-Royce. I no doubt will be replacing all 6 ignition coils in the future with the Aldor ignition coil. So I'd highly recommend watching that video for a breakdown as to why this isn't the recommended ignition coil to use on your BMW in 2021. So as you can see, I have just swapped over the ignition coil on the first cylinder to the second cylinder and vice versa. Unfortunately for me, after clearing the code and starting the car again, the cylinder 1 misfire returned, so it isn't the ignition coil that's on cylinder 1. I proceeded to do exactly the same with cylinder 4 and cylinder 6 and exchanging those with cylinder 1, and that didn't work. I keep getting a cylinder 1 misfire. Now, I had the spark plugs changed, all 6 of them, in January as soon as I managed to get the car running again. It needed a new battery, a new starter motor, and I thought while they were replacing the starter motor, I might as well change the spark plugs. So I am hoping that the spark plugs are still okay. So the plan of action for today is to continue problem solving, trying to diagnose the fault. I'm going to start by removing all the ignition coils and performing a visual inspection. After that, I'm just going to continue to cycle through all 6 ignition coils just to be absolutely certain that it isn't one of the ignition coils. If that fails, then I'm going to have to start to diagnose the spark plug, so I'll probably need to head out to get some tools to allow me to remove and replace the spark plug, and I'll get a brand new spark plug and replace the one on cylinder 1, though I was hoping that I wouldn't need to do this because I've had all 6 replaced recently. All 6 spark plugs were replaced in January. So I managed to get all 6 ignition coils removed from the car yesterday and performed a visual health check on the ignition coils. All 6 are the original Bosch ignition coils. I don't think they've been replaced in the entire 14 years that the car has been running. After some additional diagnosis yesterday, swapping over all the ignition coils, I was unable to get the misfire on cylinder 1 to move. I did, however, manage to get another ignition coil failure and misfire on the 6th cylinder. So I don't know whether all the ignition coils are bad, or maybe one of them is throwing the other one off. So I decided to replace all 6 ignition coils. So I've ordered another 6 OEM ignition coils that arrive tomorrow. I've gone with the Bosch ignition coil. This was fitted on the car really when it was released in 2006. I do know that there have been some additional iterations on this ignition coil. It's now on the 4th iteration. This was the 2nd iteration, and that the Aldor ignition coils are the recommended ones. But look, I'm not wanting to introduce an additional variable to the problem I'm trying to solve at the moment. It was relatively inexpensive to get 6 for 140 quid, so around 23 quid each. So as soon as they arrive tomorrow, I'll be looking to install all 6, and hopefully this problem will go away. I have just had 6 ignition coils delivered by post. I have them ready here, and I'm going to unbox them, and in 10 or so minutes I'm going to nip outside and fit them, and hopefully that will be the end of this misfire on cylinder 1. Yesterday I fitted 6 new ignition coils that arrived in the post. I had 6 Bosch ignition coils arrive in the post yesterday, and proceeded to remove the OEM ignition coils that were installed on the car and replaced all 6. Unfortunately for me, the car refused to start. It would continue to turn over, but there would be no spark, and the car wouldn't start. What I then did was replaced the new ignition coils with all the old ones, and the cylinder 1 misfire moved. Now, in all the previous days I hadn't been able to get the cylinder 1 misfire to move. It was obstinate, and I thought that it might be the spark plugs, but for the first time yesterday it started moving. And then I managed to actually figure out the failing ignition coil, which is this one here currently, which is the installed one. You can see it's quite a dark color, and I then replaced it with one of the newer ignition coils. This is one of the newer ones, and this is a grey color. The difference between these two is that this one says it's made in Germany at the top. This one's made in Slovenia. Obviously that's a dark brown. That is a darkish grey. I really struggled to get the new ignition coil to fit snugly. When I'm swapping about these ignition coils, the original ones, they fit very snugly, and I literally don't have to try and force the ignition coil at all to fit. The new ones, however, just don't appear to be a snug fit. At the moment, what I've done is I've replaced the failing ignition coil, which is this one, with 2 new Bosch ones, but the cylinder misfire remains on the ignition coil with the new ignition coil, and now when I move the new ignition coil, the cylinder 1 misfire is now following the new Bosch ignition coil. So I'm at my wit's end at the moment. I went to a parts shop yesterday. They had a look and came up with exactly the same product code. So I may have to seek another opinion. It could be that it's me. I'm pretty certain you can't really cock this job up. I mean, it's literally you place the ignition coil within sort of the column that covers the spark plug, and it's literally just this lid basically that clips on top. You plug it in and then you drop this. Now the issue that I've got is that with the current housing for the wires, it easily slots into this one, but it's not slotting into this one that easily. There are 3 male pins in both. They do look almost identical apart from the color, but for whatever reason the ignition coil isn't starting when I enter or when I install one of these new ignition coils. So the good news, I guess, for me is that it doesn't appear to be the spark plugs, because that obviously would have added the surface area for this particular repair. I'm going to try and source an original part now, so I'm probably going to look for a second-hand ignition coil, one that matches that one exactly, and see if I can install that one and see if I can eliminate the misfire. But at the moment I'm still having fun and games trying to get an ignition coil that works on my BMW E91 Touring. I have just managed to resolve the cylinder 1 misfire that was present on my BMW. The root cause was the ignition coil on cylinder 4 that had failed. That needed to be replaced, which I've just done. Now the issue that I had with the ignition coils that were delivered a couple of days ago and the initial ignition coil that I purchased was that they were the wrong product code. I will show you a couple of pictures of the incorrect and correct ignition coils at the end of this video, but for whatever reason I had been sent the incorrect ignition coils. I managed to speak with a technician at Euro Car Parts who was very helpful and was kind enough to even say, look, nip outside with one of these ignition coils and see if it fits on my car. I noticed that it fitted immediately, and as soon as I got back home I was able to detect the misfire and to swap the faulty ignition coil with the brand new one, and the problem has gone away. So I'm absolutely cock-a-hoop that I've been able to resolve this check engine light by myself again. I will show you a couple of videos with the car before the change and after the change, and it's pretty clear to see and hear the difference now that the ignition coil has been replaced on my BMW E91 Touring. So yesterday I was able to install 5 brand new ignition coils on my BMW onto cylinder 1, 2, 3, 5 and 6. The ignition coil on cylinder 4 was replaced a couple of days ago. That is where the problem was. Proceeded to install the 5 ignition coils yesterday. These are the old ignition coils that I've just boxed up. I'll be looking to probably sell these for next to nothing. I don't think I'm going to sell them for more than a tenner. This is because the car has been absolutely transformed by the new ignition coils. I would highly recommend that you do not use second-hand ignition coils except to diagnose a fault. Like a light bulb, it's probably not worth purchasing a component that has a particular task. Most ignition coils have a calculated lifetime. It can only spark the car up X amount of times. So if you're looking for a longer lifetime between servicing your car, I'd highly recommend you just replace the ignition coils with brand new ones. Here I've still got the wrong ignition coils that I'll be posting back. I wasn't really intending to create another ignition coil video, but I've been absolutely blown away by the performance of these 6 new ignition coils. It feels as if I've got a brand new car. It's unbelievable the way that the car is now driving. The gears are completely engaging and electrifying, if I'm honest. Completely responsive. It doesn't matter which gear it is. It feels as if I've got a brand new gearbox and a brand new car, if I'm honest. As is the clutch, where before it was quite rubbery and I was having to lift it quite high. It is now feeling like a brand new clutch. So again, an unexpected consequence really of replacing my ignition coils. I'd highly recommend, if you've got a car with 100,000 miles, if it's a BMW, maybe not even a BMW, if it's a petrol car, change the ignition coils, because the transformation is just absolutely amazing. The final item, I really didn't have a clue how I was going to fix this. Now, ever since I purchased the car, you'd turn the engine on, and if you let the car idle, it felt as if it was idling elliptically. So typically you expect something to just kind of go round, but the engine felt as if it was kind of going in this kind of a motion, and the car would kind of wobble when you were idling. I was really at 6s and 7s as to how on earth I'd fix that problem. But lo and behold, changing the ignition coils has rectified that problem. So I'm absolutely thrilled at the result of replacing the ignition coils on my BMW. I would highly recommend that you do this on your BMW if you find that maybe the gears aren't quite right, or your clutch isn't quite right, or the car itself isn't idling particularly smoothly. I paid around 30 quid an ignition coil for ignition coils that are going to last for quite a few years. I really can't recommend changing your ignition coils highly enough. They have completely transformed my BMW E91 Touring.